Those goosebumps every time, yeah, 713 through the 281, yeah, I'm riding. Why they on me? I'm flying.
Welcome back to the Comeback Kid, everyone. When we were last with you, we were discussing the Las Vegas Golden Knights and their resurgence, and now we move to something a little controversial, Nate. You have some choice words over the weekend. You were gone this weekend, but you made it a point to text Matt and I, hey, we need to talk about this. This is important. And it involves the Houston Texans and their owner. Can you recap kind of what's been going on with this situation?
Yes. So, as you guys know, that there's been a lot of discussion in the NFL about the national anthem and about standing during the national anthem, sitting, kneeling, and all this kind of stuff. And so, over the past couple of weeks, last week there was a group of players that went to go meet with some of the NFL owners to talk about, talk about the issue. And what the Houston Texans owner said about players kneeling during the anthem was, he said, quote, "We can't have the inmates running the prison." I'm going to repeat that. We can't have the inmates running the prison. So there are a lot of layers to this. I mean, first off, man, to me, first off, to know that that's how you look at your players as inmates, the players that have worked their entire lives to get to where they are today, the players that if it weren't for them, you would not be the rich man that you are without these quote unquote inmates that work for you. Those players are busting their butt every single day of the week in order to go out and play a game that makes you rich. And that's how you see your players as inmates? Richard Sherman tweeted out that he said, "Hey, don't apologize. If that's truly how you see us, then thank you for being candid. Thank you for exposing yourself and saying that, hey, that's really how you see your players." And to me, that's what's been that's been kind of the good of like this whole, just really you can make an argument the whole political climate of the United States right now is that those those closet racists that had been hiding for years, those people are finally getting exposed, and we're finally getting a chance to see people for who they truly are. There were people that I considered my friends that I'm finding out are just really these deep down, they've got these sick racist thoughts, and to me it's sad, but it's also very revealing.
Yeah, it's very. It just seems like, and it's a good thing that this is a continued dialogue, but it seems like this just won't end. There's layers upon layers and people coming out all the time with nasty quote after nasty quote and media exposure and further media exposure behind it. And so this poses the question, Nate, when will this NFL conversation in ties to racial injustice in America, when will this end?
Well, like I said earlier, there have been kind of these meetings between players and owners, and there was actually supposed to be a meeting today, but it got canceled. And honestly, I think that these meetings between players and owners are a bunch of crap. To me, I think it's just PR by the owners to say, "Hey, look, we're meeting with these black players, so clearly we care about these issues." No. If the owners really cared about racism, if the owners really cared about police brutality, Colin Kaepernick would have a job right now, and he wouldn't have been blacklisted by the NFL owners. So to me, I think Michael Bennett said it last week. That these owners, they're just it's a bunch of garbage. Or not the owners, sorry. Well, the owners are a bunch of garbage, but also just these meetings. It's PR. It's to save face, and actually. We found out yesterday, I think it may have been yesterday, a couple days ago, that some of the owners kind of want to get rid of Roger Goodell, because from what I can tell, it's the owners want to kind of come up with this law basically that players have to stand, and Roger Goodell won't go along with it. And now, because for the first time Roger Goodell is kind of rebelling, I'm using air quotes right now. I understand that this is a podcast and people can't see what we're doing, but I'm using air quotes right now around the term rebelling against what the owners want. Now they kind of want to get him out of there. And I'm not a fan of Roger Goodell, but I got to say that I'm happy that they didn't go ahead and put something forward that you have to stand for the national anthem, because I think you guys have heard me say it before that forced patriotism is not patriotism. Patriotism is earned. It's not. You don't just the reason. Just to say something about myself, I don't stand for the national anthem because, like I said, patriotism is earned. It's not something that I just give to you. You've got to earn it.
Honestly, I think it's silly just how the national anthem has ever been associated with sports, and like why we have to even stand for it. Like why is that the ultimate sign of respect? I don't really understand it. I stand during the anthem, but you won't see me put my hand over my heart and singing it. It's for me playing hockey. We always hear it before the game. That was a time where I got nervous because I was about to do something that I wasn't sure I could do. Like up until like my sophomore year in high school, I was like a 4'8" little kid going up against like 6 feet tall, like behemoths. Like it was a time of being nervous, and like that's still like I'm still nervous during the national anthem, and it's all of a sudden it's all changing. I think from a business perspective, what we're seeing in Texas in general is very interesting. On our first show, we mentioned how Jerry Jones was kneeling with his players before the anthem out of a sign of maybe unity. I'm not sure what his intentions are, but what we're seeing there is an owner who's protecting his assets. His players are assets, and he knows that they make them revenue. So even there, that's a different mentality than just straight up bagging on your players that your scouts, your general manager have all worked very hard in developing, and your owner just wants to go out there and just bag on them, especially when you have the likes of Deshaun Watson just ripping the league open. Now is not the time to be making these comments, especially in Houston, a city that's still trying to rebuild from other things that are arguably way more important than sports right now. Yeah. Now is not the time for these remarks. And frankly, there's never a time for these remarks.
What a time for the city of Houston at large, right? You have the World Series going on. You have these comments emerging. But Nate, the Houston Dynamo, here we are.
Oh, man.
Taking down Sporting Kansas City the other night. Just enlighten the public regarding what you saw in this year's MLS playoffs.
Well, first off, it's about time that MLS got the respect that it deserves on this podcast. So it is right now. The MLS playoffs have already started. We just got through the knockout stages, and the first leg of the conference semifinals began last night. Vancouver and Seattle played to a scoreless draw. And just a couple of things that have stood out to me during the playoffs. Columbus Crew and Atlanta United was a tremendous match. It was probably the most exciting 0-0 draw I've ever seen, like 0-0 in regulation, like most exciting I've ever seen. It was just back and forth and great goalkeeping on both sides. Zach Steffen and Brad Guzan were both absolutely tremendous. The match ended up going to penalty kicks, and Zach Steffen basically stood on his head and was tremendous during PKs. Columbus was able to go into Atlanta United and face down 70,000 people, get the win, and what a win for a team and for a city that has a very, very unknown future. Yeah. And I'm really rooting for the Columbus Crew because they can't move a team that wins an MLS Cup. So that's why as someone who has lost their team before, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody. So I know what Columbus Crew fans are feeling right now, and I'm with you.
I think a lot of credit also to the team that lost, Atlanta. They've done a lot in their first season. Talking about expansion teams, constantly breaking their own record for the most amount of people attending MLS games. I know attendance is a number that you'll stand to more than Ben and I will, but I think that says a lot about that soccer is ready to take another step in the U.S., albeit with a lot of hesitation. We've been wanting to see a team in San Diego for a while now. We got one, the San Diego 1904, but we want to see an MLS team here, and we want to see a more competitive MLS. But I think Atlanta is a sign of what's to come.
Well, like I've said before, obviously we've talked about how the U.S. men's national team failed to qualify for the World Cup, and I don't want to dwell on that anymore. But I think that if your soccer culture is dependent on the national team and only the success of the national team, then your soccer culture is doomed to fail. So I think that one of the important things, if we want to see soccer grow in the United States, then we've got to support our local clubs. We need to support MLS, the USL, the NASL, the NWSL. Like, we need to go out. We need to support these leagues. Even if it's like, I'm not asking you guys to, like, go all rah-rah and talk about how, amazing MLS is. But just, like, even just going and watching the games, even watching them on TV, like, MLS, these guys will make fun of it, and I understand, it's nowhere near the quality of the European leagues. But, for a league that's pretty much as old as we are, it's pretty good, and it's growing.
MLS, NASL, NWSL don't matter. Astros in 6.
Oh my god. So Nate, you mentioned the Premier League. Matt, we're gonna have to cut you off from that. Like, I think we're putting that to rest today. It's over, Matt. It's over.
No. Matt's not gonna say anything for the rest of the show. It's done.
No, he can. But anyways, so you mentioned the Premier League, and there were some matches this past weekend. They happened. Matt and I went to Shakespeare's Pub and Grill, which is a local bar here in San Diego, and they show Premier League soccer bright and early, 4:30 a.m., 7 a.m., whatever your preference is. They're open. They're showing soccer. There's fans in there. They're passionate. And Matt and I wanted to get up to watch the Chelsea game, which we did not know was at 9:30, so we showed up at 7 to watch Liverpool-Huddersfield, and although this wasn't our desired match we wanted to watch, it was rather interesting because if Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp had lost this match to Huddersfield, this most likely would have been the end of Jurgen Klopp's tenure at Liverpool.
Arguably, this game was more interesting than the Chelsea-Bournemouth game that we would have seen because Hazard just had one goal in the 51st minute, and that was it. Yeah, I think we spoke about it last week that Jurgen Klopp is on the hot seat. And really just hasn't gotten a lot out of his side. And Nate will speak a lot to their defensive issues. There's really not a lot going on there. But we were talking about how Huddersfield has surprisingly beat Man U last week. So we're thinking, hey, if Huddersfield wins this game, Jurgen Klopp's probably out. Like before that game, it was like almost like a 90% chance. But I don't think I've ever seen a grown man so giddy after seeing his team score, because he knew that his players saved him for at least another week from getting sacked, and hopefully that's all the momentum that they need. I'm sure that in a very close standings, that this has probably put them higher up in the table and maybe give them a little more space to breathe. But I think it was a good result for Liverpool, and hopefully that's a sign of what's to come for them.
Yeah, so, Matt, you mentioned at least for another week, right? Because in a season, you have a match next week. Liverpool has a match next week that Jurgen Klopp is going to have to at least get a good result out of. And so he is at, even though it was a great win, he is still in the danger zone. And so that is very telling. So the question I want to pose to you guys is, how much longer do you think Jurgen Klopp has as manager of Liverpool?
If he sustains the success that he had in this last match, he goes throughout the whole year before they ask questions. But what I want to know is, when do they play Crystal Palace? Because if they lose to a team like Crystal Palace or any team in danger of relegation, I think that game alone is enough to set them off. But yeah, I think this game has done a lot to save Jurgen. And Nate, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I actually think that Jurgen Klopp has more time than you guys think, because of one of the things that's helping him out is the fact that they got a pretty easy draw in the Champions League. So I think that they're pretty much, unless some like tragedy happens, which we know with Liverpool, they're defensively, you don't know what's going to happen, but I think that they're pretty set to get through to the Champions League knockout stages, and I think that alone honestly could save him going into next year. Now, if they finish outside the top 6, then maybe, like I said before, then maybe some questions need to be asked, but I think that Jurgen Klopp is more safe than you guys think.
I think a really telling moment for Jurgen Klopp is going to be the January transfer window, and if they can address some of these defensive issues, and if they can bring Virgil van Dijk, finally bring him over to Liverpool from Southampton, and that's been an ongoing process for seemingly an entire year to try to bring him. So if they're able to address some of their defensive needs in January, I think they'll leave him in the manager's role through January, and if the team is able to turn around and, yes, I agree with you, get that top 6 finish, at least qualify for Europa League after having a good result in Champions League, I think that Jurgen Klopp is not in as much trouble as we could have thought. And that's largely because they did win 3-0 this past week, and that was a huge win for them. Defensively, they locked down Huddersfield. I don't think they had a shot on goal in the first half. So that was really one of our first signs all season that Liverpool defensively have been good. So possibly they're turning it around defensively already.
Yeah, I agree that the January transfer window is going to be huge, and not only trying to go out and get a center back and address some of your defensive issues, but also kind of the situation with Coutinho and what's going to happen with Coutinho. You know, is he going to stay? Is he going to go? Because the problem with, you say that you want to go out and address some of your defensive issues. Well, in order to do that, you might have to let Coutinho go. So, there's a lot of questions right now surrounding Liverpool and kind of what's happening.
Yeah, so Jurgen Klopp is one manager on the hot seat. Another manager who we believe is on the hot seat, but he himself refuses to believe he's on the hot seat, is Antonio Conte. Matt, can you shed some light to our listeners what is going on with Antonio Conte?
Yeah, so Chelsea, the former champions of the league, have, to say the least, had a lot of questionable outings as of late, and even at the beginning of the season. Sure, they've done it without their recent summer acquisition of Alvaro Morata, who's back now, but they haven't looked like champions. So I think that's put Antonio Conte on the hot seat. But recently, in an interview, he denied claims that his job is in jeopardy, saying that it is, quote, bowl sugar honey iced tea.
Oh, man.
You have to have a lot of confidence to believe that you are the answer. To go out and say that. I know the communication rules are different in England than here. Obviously, he would not get away with saying that here in the U.S., but I think you have to have a lot of confidence to say that.
The only people that come out and say things like that when their job is in jeopardy are people whose job is in jeopardy.
Definitely. So we kind of need to wrap it up here, guys, but before we do, I do want to pose the question: does Antonio Conte last the season? Yes or no?
No. Next season, Chelsea will have a new manager.
I think he stays.
Great. So that's it from us for this segment. We do have one more segment, so great job, guys. When we come back, we let you know who, or this week, what rides the bus, and then we will give you what we are watching this coming week in the world of sports. Stay tuned, you guys. We'll be right back.